Advanced Residential Applications and Case Studies. Chapter 2, Advanced Residential Appraisal Concepts. Page 11, check your understanding, quiz. This quiz has a total of 3 questions. There will be 1 question per page. You must achieve 67% to pass the quiz. Start quiz. Number 1, why is it important to identify the intended use of an appraisal? A, it establishes the appraisal fee. B, it lets the appraiser know how much to appraise the property for. C, it is essential in making the scope of work decision. Or D, all of these. I'm going to go C. Number 2, when an appraiser is in appraising a property, supposes something to be true which is actually known to be false. This is A, a hypothetical condition. B, an extraordinary assumption. C, a violation of USPAP. Or D, a parenthetical exemption. I'm going to go A, hypothetical condition. And lastly, number 3, which statement is most likely true regarding a property that is sold with special low interest below market financing? A, its sale price and its market value should be the same. B, its sale price will probably be lower than its market value. C, its sale price will probably be higher than its market value. Or D, it is not legal to sell a property with special below market financing. I think it's C because this was in the last chapter. Yeah, I'm gonna go. It's probably gonna be selling for higher because of the good low interest rate. Finish. You passed. You got 100%. So remember, number 1, why is it important to identify the intended use of an appraisal? You said it is essential in making the scope of work decision, and that was correct. Number 2, when an appraiser, in appraising a property, supposes something to be true which is actually known to be false, this is, you said, a hypothetical condition, and that was correct. And lastly, number 3, which statement is most likely true regarding a property that is sold with special low interest below market financing? You said its sale price will probably be higher than its market value, and that was correct. Continue. Page 12. Scope of work decision. Standards Rule 1-2H states that having completed the steps in identifying the appraisal problem, you are now ready to determine the appropriate scope of work for this assignment. Once you have determined the appropriate scope of work, you are able to determine whether you have the knowledge and experience necessary to perform the appraisal. Remember the competency rule? Let's review the scope of work rule now. Scope of work rule. For each appraisal or appraisal review assignment, an appraiser must: number 1, identify the problem to be solved. Number 2, determine and perform the scope of work necessary to develop credible assignment results. And number 3, disclose the scope of work in the report. An appraiser must properly identify the problem to be solved in order to determine the appropriate scope of work. The appraiser must be prepared to demonstrate that the scope of work is sufficient to produce credible assignment results. Comment: scope of work includes, but is not limited to, the extent to which the property is identified, the extent to which tangible property is inspected, the type and extent of data researched, and the type and extent of analysis applied to arrive at opinions or conclusions. Appraisers have broad flexibility and significant responsibility in determining the appropriate scope of work for an appraisal or appraisal review assignment. Credible assignment results require support by relevant evidence and logic. The credibility of assignment results is always measured in the context of the intended use. The appraiser is responsible for determining the scope of work in an appraisal or appraisal review assignment. The client may have some input into the scope of work. However, the appraiser is ultimately responsible to ensure the scope of work is sufficient to produce credible assignment results. The appraiser is also responsible for problem identification, according to the scope of work rule. Problem identification. An appraiser must gather and analyze information about those assignment elements that are necessary to properly identify the appraisal or appraisal review problem to be solved. Comment: the assignment elements necessary for problem identification are addressed in the applicable standards rules. For instance, SR 1-2, SR 3-2, SR 5-2, SR 7-2, and SR 9-2. In an appraisal assignment, for example, identification of the problem to be solved requires the appraiser to identify the following assignment elements: client and any other intended users, intended use of the appraiser's opinions and conclusions, type and definition of value, effective date of the appraiser's opinions and conclusions, subject of the assignment and its relevant characteristics, and assignment conditions. This information provides the appraiser with the basis for determining the type and extent of research and analysis to include in the development of an appraisal. Similar information is necessary for problem identification in appraisal review assignments. Communication with the client is required to establish most of the information necessary for problem identification. However, the identification of relevant characteristics is a judgment made by the appraiser that requires competency in that type of assignment. Assignment conditions include assumptions, extraordinary assumptions, hypothetical conditions, jurisdictional exemptions, and other conditions that affect the scope of work. Laws include constitutions, legislative and court-made law, administrative rules, and ordinances. Regulations include rules or orders having legal force issued by an administrative agency. We will further examine the scope of work rule on the next page. End of page.